Would you guys believe me if I said this show's co-creator was one of the first accounts I ever followed on Twitter and one of the biggest reasons I got into animation the way I did? Yeah, it's safe to say that Dan Povenmire, Swampy Marsh, and their work had a huge influence on my life growing up. Heck, the first Mudkip I ever nicknamed was named after one of them. What does that tell you? So when Dan was being sentimental about that TikTok ban, a ban that lasted like 10 minutes, I felt a bit disheartened. He does owe a lot of his publicity to the site like he implied, but it felt like he didn't realize how much he indirectly inspired people way before that site came to be. Because I'm a living example of it. My film degree, my ambitions, my videos, my drive, and really my hopes for the future as a whole. A lot of that is owed to the work behind Phineas and Ferb and, by extension, Dan and Swampy's experiences behind the scenes. This show was one of the few good cartoons I could watch growing up that my overly religious mother didn't question, and then as I got older, I looked more into the stuff behind the scenes, to say the least. People like them were the reason I wanted to get Comic-Con tickets growing up. Not that I ever could, because f*** the raffle system. The struggle, the humor, the talent, it can bring out a lot in people in the best of ways. These guys spent 15 years trying to get this show picked up by a network, and it has become one of Disney's most, if not the most recognizable TV show. If that's not inspirational, I don't know what is. Maybe Dan Povenmire himself wasn't recognizable to most people before TikTok, but well, he was to me. Seriously, if I ever bumped into him at, say, Disneyland, my grown ass might just lose my marbles, and 10 years ago, it would have been no different. I don't mean to brag about being ahead of my time or anything like that, I just really want to put it out there that, well, you can bring out a lot of ambition and creativity in people without even being entirely aware of exactly who. And I wish I could tell that to people like him when he maybe needed to hear it. Just wanted to give some context for the inspiration behind this video and to say, well, never give up! Every video I make is owed in part to some form of motivation like that. As for the rest of my resolve, well, that comes from liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing to the channel. Please and thank you. Well guys, it's no secret that I'm a big fan of Phineas and Ferb. Or at least, I think it isn't.
Flashback.
The series, and try to understand more why I deem it my favorite animated show of all time. After, believe me when I say this, a lot of years worth of on and off deliberation.
End of flashback.
So when I heard that season 5 was underway, despite its charming conclusion from a decade ago, at first, I thought to myself, well, firstly, how old am I again?
I'm old!
Secondly, why? To say that I felt conflicted was a hell of an understatement when you consider how it ended back then. Summer officially ended, Phineas and Isabella do get together someday, Doofenshmirtz got to rule the tri-state area like he always wanted for a time, and realized that evil was never really his thing. He was convicted for his schemes, and Phineas even broke the fourth wall as a touching farewell to the audience. So imagine my confusion when most of that was undermined 10 years later. That's its own thing. Canonically, 1 year later, we got another summer, Doof relapsed into evil, and, well, I'm really glad at least that didn't change. And it never should. So I couldn't help but wonder if this reboot was ever really appropriate, let alone necessary. Does the good in these new episodes outweigh the bad of their conception? Is there any good at all in this new season? Or is it ultimately just a shallow cash grab on Disney's end? Don't take my word for that last part though. Dan admitted that Disney reached out to him for this project at first, not the other way around. Judging from just the first episode alone, which everyone can watch for free, I hope. Yeah, they still got it. It seems like this series was tied up properly enough, but not to a point where it needed to end yet. Trust me, I of all people know how problematic it can be when a series goes on for too long, to say the least. So, I can safely say that even with my reluctance and or my biases, this show's still a lot of fun and none of it feels forced. And I'm really not the kind of guy to go all leave the multi-billion-dollar corporation alone. Right off the bat, the music's still great, the humor's still self-aware and charming, it takes itself just the right amount of seriously, and all the characters feel like they never left, which honestly says a lot about the writing. Phineas is as optimistic as always, Ferb is ever so silent but capable, Isabella is outgoing and adorable as usual. Oh look! A love interest voiced by Alison Stoner that wasn't shoehorned into the cast and actually has personality. Point is, after nearly a decade, it's really refreshing to see a revival that didn't change too much from the original for its own good. Although, maybe with Disney the bar is just that low.
Ouch.
It helps that they brought back a lot of the same writers from the past, but hey, a lot can change in a decade. Even so, this season also feels just the right amount of different. Just from this first episode alone, I was already hooked again. The energy, the humor, the comedy, the running gags, it's all there and it's as good as ever. And amidst all the narrative conclusions, there were still a couple loose ends that, yeah, I'm totally down to explore. I do want to see Meet Me in St. Louis ever since it got teased all the way back then. I do want to see Stacy more involved with Perry ever since she learned his secret identity. It's nice to see characters like Coltrane again.
Who?
Exactly! I do want the context behind the lyrics.
Me mama foo foo, ya ya ya.
I do want to see the Fireside Girls descend into anarchy over cupcake. Wait, what?
I love the taste!
I do want to hear some more shoobidap diddy pop diddy 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 ba. And yeah, I kinda do buy it that in the 10 years before he more or less retired, Doof did go back to being evil once in a while. It's just nice to see him back in somewhat of his element when you consider that what's been going on in the other areas of this franchise. The fact that he was a mainstay character in Season 2 of Milo Murphy, which some would say was narratively problematic, and then there's those backdoor pilots that amounted to nothing. I will never forgive Disney for wasting a casting of J.K. Simmons like this. In a way, Doof is kinda harmlessly crashing out in this revival, and I'm here for it. Even Vanessa, who spurred his resolution in the finale back then, acknowledges that, ultimately, his idea of evil is really not worth taking seriously. Just look at this moment from the new season.
Oh, so we're evil again? Hi, Perry. I'm meeting up with some friends. Try not to blow yourself up.
I'm not making any promises.
She's like, oh, what's good, Perry? Oh, Dad's evil again? Nah, he'll grow out of it soon enough. Have fun. It is bothersome that his motivations kinda undermine his growth from the finale, but to be fair, and I say this as a lifelong fan of it, this franchise doesn't really hinge on those kind of ideas most of the time in the first place. It's like the Emperor's New Groove. Yeah, Kuzco gets humbled by the end, but is that really what you liked or remembered the most about this movie?
Pull the lever, Kronk.
Don't get me wrong, I always appreciate good character growth, but most of the time, this show isn't really here to promote development between characters or teach a valuable lesson. It's great when it does, and sometimes my heart melts in the process, but most of the time, that's not really the case, and maybe there's some value in the rarity of it. Ironically, to the point where there might not be any harm in disregarding it just this once. With that being said, if they ever retcon Phineas and Isabella getting together, they're gonna find themselves in the afterlife, okay? Maybe do take some liberties there.
She's 16.
Ultimately, this show is just about a bunch of kids making the best of their summer vacation with outlandishly crazy inventions and occasionally saving people in the process. They're just here to have fun with it most of the time. It's why Phineas's infectious optimism is so effective overall and just feels genuine because, well, we know damn well he's really just that innocent and naive. He's like Moo Moo from Mario Kart. You don't know why the hell she's still smiling after a loss unless you consider the fact that she's really just that cheerful. Yes, comment section, I am very well aware that his name is Cow and not Moo Moo, and to that, all I have to say is...
I recognize the council has made a decision, but given that it's a stupid-ass decision, I've elected to ignore it.
Why do you think Phineas took it so hard when Perry's identity was revealed in the first movie? Why do you think he didn't realize Isabella was in love with him until she was about to leave for college? And even that had to be told to him up front.
You are kidding, right? You do know she had a giant crush on you for ages.
No.
That's why the show's formulaic ideas are still pretty damn successful after all these years, and even before then, they just make the emotional moments between characters all the more endearing sometimes. Boys build inventions, older sister wants to show mom, their secret agent pet fights a bad guy schemes accidentally eliminates said invention, rinse and repeat. Episodic, but in all the right ways. It simply knows exactly when to take itself seriously and when not to. Simply put, it's not that deep, bro. Most of the time it isn't serious, and that's fine because the comedy's still charming and it's got a certain dignity to it that I really don't see in other popular cartoons nowadays. And that balance is displayed well enough in this pilot episode. everyone's the same character, and for good measure, the animation is above average. Remember how Star vs. the Forces of Evil did a complete shift between seasons 1 and 2 in the animation department? Well, it basically feels like that, but in reverse. And all in all, the spirit of the show is still intact. The boys are recapping their previous summer, we got a new song to commemorate the occasion. Yo, find someone who looks at you the way Isabella looks at Phineas. Okay, that's another thing I want to address. Can we, as a society, stop pretending that her crush on Phineas was ever problematic in any way? I'm telling you, the amount of times I've seen randos on the internet say, "Oh, Isabella's a simp. Oh my gosh, yeah, she finally has character outside of her crush, like a true girl boss, blah blah blah," or something stupid along those lines. It's just nauseating. Because even way back when, the narrative never let her character be defined by her feelings for him to a fault. If the term really even applies, Isabella Garcia Shapiro is probably the only respectable simp I've ever seen in fiction. Right from the first episode way back when, her feelings for him never came off as unhealthy. She's always held a lot of personality even when he's not present. She's never hurt him in any way, and she's always genuinely happy to spend time with him without demanding more of him or crossing boundaries. Heck, she spent this whole movie without any reference or implication of her crush, and ironically, that's what came off as distracting, but I think that's just owed to the 5-year gap. It's a big part of her character, but it's definitely not all she is. Not even close. And to insinuate otherwise just tells me you really don't pay attention to the series. I don't mean to call anyone out, but I'd say the people praising these redundancies are just projecting their own insecurities. Honestly, screw those losers. Stand proud and get your man, girl. Which she sure still tries in this new season. Speaking of which, the kids build new inventions for the start of the summer festival. Mom wants a family photo because she feels like she missed out on spending time with her family last summer. Which, okay, the emotions are brief, but they're believable, and when you think about it, it all adds up. Harry stops Stoof, only this time his innator makes Mom disappear instead of their invention. Wait, what? Yeah, Mama literally got dusted, and apparently the only way to save her is to protect what's left of her and get her to cry. It all sounds so dumb on paper, but once you get into it, you can definitely appreciate all the details and moments, especially if you were already a fan of the show back in the day. The inventions, the Perry-Doof dynamic, Buford's outlandish sense of defiance, Isabella referring to Linda as her future mother-in-law, Ferb's unnatural prowess at basically everything, and more so a break in the norm, getting me to feel bad for probably the only character in the show I dislike. Yeah, they actually got me to pity the borderline self-insert that is Irving. I swear, it's like they knew this character was dislikable in some capacity, and they just worked with it. Just when you think a show couldn't get better, it feels like it's back in its prime. Honestly guys, in a long line of disappointing or underwhelming revivals nowadays, this show really doesn't have the issues most of those do. All in all, Season 5 of Phineas and Ferb feels like meeting up with an old friend after all these years and hitting it off with them immediately. You still crack jokes, you still laugh with them, you still bond over the same hobbies, and when it's all said and done, you're just really happy to have them back in your life. I can see why people have gripes about the milking of this franchise, myself included, as I've hopefully made clear, but as of right now, let's not pretend that the milk doesn't still taste great. Maybe it'll start going sour later down the line, but after watching the 10 episodes released so far, I don't think that time is now, because some of these episodes really threw me in for a loop, and I mean that in the best of ways.
Son of a cat!
And after seeing the amount of passion and effort Dan and the crew have put into the show behind the scenes, I sincerely doubt that'll happen in the span of the 2 planned seasons. But only time will tell. Not to spoil too much, but I will say one thing though. Disney, stop trying to make screaming goats happen. It's not going to happen. That aside though, Phineas and Ferb is still based.
He said it! He said it!